Okay. We're gonna start right on time because our Speaker of the House is with us, who likes to start on time. House Bill 1010. Madam Speaker, welcome. And I think Chanel Compton is with you. This is the African American Heritage Preservation Program. Ms. Compton, come on up. Sorry, I didn't realize you weren't here yet. Welcome, Madam Speaker.
Ready?
Ready for
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee, my old committee. For the record, Speaker Adrian Jones. I'm here today to testify on House Bill 1010, African American Heritage Preservation Program and Grant Fund, non-capital grants and donations. As some of you may know, I sponsored the legislation to establish the African American Heritage Preservation Grant Program 15 years ago. And it is the only program dedicated to the preservation, protection, and enhancement of African American historical and cultural resources in the state of Maryland. When it comes to this important work, we can always do more. So to provide more flexibility in our efforts to preserve our history, my legislation allows the program to accept donations that can be used for non-capital programming. This programming is a critical part of the sharing of stories of African American experience in Maryland, and the unmet need to support these activities needs to be addressed. Thank you, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1010.
Thank you. Would you like to testify?
Greetings, distinguished chair and members of the committee. I first want to thank Speaker Adrian Jones for her unwavering support on this milestone, really a national model of historic preservation program resources. The capital grant itself has funded over 210 African American heritage projects. Many of these sites would have been closed or undergoing major disrepair. This non-capital grant program is essential in keeping African American heritage preservation alive and thriving, not just in the more popular areas of Maryland, excuse me, I live in Baltimore City, but also in rural, lesser-known areas in Maryland as well, such as preserving the programming of historic community centers, small museums, museum homes, and historic sites. So this program is an important addition to African American historic tourism a sector in Maryland, as well as keeping educational access to African American heritage alive and thriving in Maryland. And when in this day and age, African American heritage preservation and Black history programming is consistently being smudged and erased all throughout the nation. So let's keep Maryland at the forefront of this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for your work. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. You can stay there. We have another bill for you coming right up next. Nice to see you, Chanel.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing. We move to House Bill 1253, Madam Speaker.
Get to the right page. Okay. Again. Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. For the record, again, not that you may have forgotten, I'm Speaker Adrian Jones, and I'm here today to testify on House Bill 1253, legislation to establish the Maryland Department of Social Equity. I sit here today as the first Black woman speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. I spent my career navigating spaces that were never designed with me in mind. But just because the space was not designed with you in mind, it does not mean that you don't belong. Maryland has always stepped up to level the playing field. We have programs that require minority and small business contracting. We support supplier diversity in state government procurement. We create economic opportunities for veteran-owned small businesses. And we run a nationally recognized program to give those harmed by the war on drugs a fair shot in the cannabis industry. Unfortunately, though, access isn't always enough. Too often, the very people these programs are meant to support don't know where to go or who to contact to get the help that they need. Programs are fractured across government, making finding those opportunities a challenge. That's why I'm introducing a bill to create the Maryland Department of Social Equity. By streamlining state government, we are breaking down barriers to ensure that disadvantaged individuals and small businesses can find and access the opportunities they need at the state, federal, and local levels. The bill will centralize all our social equity programs across state government and put them under a single, efficient cabinet-level agency, giving equity a literal seat at the table. The bill will transform government so that everyone can navigate this space, not just those that were originally designed to serve. We are stronger when everyone has the same access to the same opportunities and sitting at the same table. Thank you, and I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1253.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much. We'll get these bills moving right away, but I do think there's another witness from the governor's office, Jeremy Baker.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, and our esteemed staff in back. My name is Jeremy Baker. I'm the Chief Legislative Officer for Governor Wes Moore. I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 1253, the creation of the Department of Social Equity. Currently, state government has 3 distinct offices for this work that are housed within 3 separate departments. The Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women-Owned Business Affairs, the Office of Social Equity, which works alongside with the Maryland Cannabis Administration, and the Office of Minority Business Enterprise within the Maryland Department of Transportation. These parallel structures have created distinct and different outcomes and experiences for Maryland's small businesses across a wide spectrum of industries. As the governor said when he announced the budget, in partnership with the General Assembly, we will make Maryland a place where businesses want to grow and thrive, create good paying jobs in industries of the future, and connect more Marylanders with opportunity. HB 1253 is an example of that partnership and provides us with an opportunity to build a more efficient and effective model to support small and minority-owned businesses as they grow and create economic opportunity for more Marylanders. Maryland's already embraced a similar customer service-driven model with our one-stop portal that allows businesses and consumers to access and renew their licenses, forms, certificates, permits, applications, and registrations from one spot. We've got to continue to innovate and create efficiencies in government, both for the taxpayer and for the businesses that so desperately need assistance. In just the last 2 weeks, we've seen over 1,250 private sector layoffs in Prince George's and Montgomery County because of the chaos in Washington. We're facing billions in additional federal cuts. The changing legal and regulatory landscape means Maryland must find innovative and thoughtful ways to support our small and minority-owned businesses and create pathways to quality work, good wages, and wealth creation independent of the federal government. We want to thank the Speaker for sponsoring this legislation. We look forward to working with her and the committee on ways to strengthen the bill, strengthen the department, and strengthen our efforts to leave no Maryland business behind. Thank you for your consideration. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 1253.
Okay, thanks for being with us. Any questions for Mr. Baker? Delegate Ralph?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for bringing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for being here in support of the bill. I am very much in support of this bill and understand the necessity for bringing all of these agencies under one umbrella. I'm wondering about whether if there's any appetite for studying how we can make sure that the transition to this a single umbrella is done immaculately, and that there is, no consequences for not being able to get the transition done seamlessly. And I'm thinking about the timeline, whether there's any appetite for a working group to study how this plan can be carried out, and potentially any delay in the timeline.
So obviously, I'm going to defer to the Speaker on timeline, but I will say this. We stand at the ready to work with any and all partners to make sure the process goes as smooth as possible. I generally think making sure presiding officers' bills are put into place in the most effective manner is generally a good idea for us.
Absolutely.
Jackson to the table as well. That's okay, Madam Speaker.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Delegate. We've worked with the administration on, trying to put an effective date in there and a transition time period in there. So, all of the budget mechanisms are in there to go ahead and move the money around, and we're open to trying to make this, as strong of a bill as possible.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hold up the money.
Sure. Of course.
But I appreciate that. I do think that that's something we should be thinking about. I'm always measure twice, cut once kind of person. So that was just my thoughts on it. I appreciate the response.
Okay. Let's see, any other questions? Madam Speaker? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Baker, good to see you. We'll get the bill moving as quick as we can, Madam Speaker. All right, we're going to move to, I see David Moon's here, Majority Leader, House Bill 1061.
Thank you, Mr.
Charlotte
Chair.
Fleckenstein can come on up as well.
And I have to say, you run a very tight ship. I'm astonished at how fast you are moving through bills over here in this committee.
Judiciary is not a fair comparison.
We will be there for a long time. Well, thank you, colleagues. House Bill 1061 is an attempt to essentially have the state proactively put its best foot forward to put our own land and assets to their highest and best use, both to raise revenue and to solve some of our thornier problems that we are facing as a state. What you see in House Bill 1061 is my effort to suggest what we do is take excess state land that is not being used and to a little bit more aggressively try and line up deals to get housing built there. And if we can't get housing built there, to look at properties, again, that the state already owns but isn't using as to whether they are suitable sites for solar leasing or energy production. So essentially, let me say that again, if we have state land that is not being used, the bill would suggest we should put it to use for housing and energy production. Now, it does this in a few ways. One, again, we're trying to get the state itself to put skin in the game on these goals. So it would suggest that we actually create targets for number of housing units generated on state land, and same for megawatts of energy production on state land. Believe it or not, President Trump actually is suggesting a similar strategy with respect to federal land and housing production. Montgomery County also has a similar program. So this is not a new policy. Now, as to the details, this actually already exists in work that your committee did previously. I believe it was a bill by Delegate Polakovich-Carr and Senator Heddleman that created a surplus land inventory and an attempt to score its suitability. But when I looked at what they did, I do believe they were a little too restrictive. They said the scoring and the deals should be for affordable housing, and that's a laudable goal, but if no one steps forward to build that affordable housing, it's unclear to me why we wouldn't look for a mixed-use development or an 85%, 15% mixed income development or some other housing that's going to come online. And affordable housing in particular, you're talking about a subsidized form of housing likely. And again, if we can't find someone to do that, this bill would open the possibility for the same land that we're already trying to get housing put on, that we would look at these other types of either mixed income or market rate housing. Again, it doesn't displace the affordable housing goal. That would still be the goal, but all of the analysis that was required again in the law that we did previously just said, can you put housing here? So that's what the analysis that's already happening does. So again, I'm trying to alter it to add more housing types. And if we can't get housing there, to start looking at solar leasing, rooftop solar, ground-based solar, and the like. Otherwise, this property gets sold to auction. It's a very new program. I think I saw one property actually was developed under what was proposed here. But again, I suspect we are highly limiting the number of housing units we can generate by limiting it solely to affordable housing. Happy to answer any questions. And I also do believe there's some fiscal note implications here. We can probably tweak this to more reflect how the agencies are currently operating their programs in order to eliminate the fiscal note. And the fiscal note is also offset by the fact that you're having sales of property going on.
Awesome. Is this one working? Okay, awesome. It says extra desk can't work, so. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Charlotte Fleckenstein, and I'm the Policy Fellow with the Maryland Association of Counties this session. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify before you all this afternoon in support of House Bill 1061. This bill requires the state to assess and determine if any excess land properties in its inventory are suitable for affordable housing or solar development. Two of the most prominent issues in a historical number of generational complex challenges facing this legislative body are the state's rising costs in both housing and energy. Unlike some other challenges which may have a more cause and effect explanation or black and white solution, housing and energy is multi-layered, and decisions made outside of the state can have dramatic impacts on what can happen within the state. This reality means that state and local policymakers must work together and be innovative in their thinking and approach, and House Bill 1061 does just that. This is smart, innovative legislation that seeks to convert surplus land into strong assets by decreasing maintenance burdens and further supporting solutions toward these two complex challenges. Ultimately, House Bill 1061 is a smart approach that seeks clean energy solutions in previously unexplored areas, and as such, MACO respectfully urges a favorable report on House Bill 1061. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Vice Chair, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of my favorite committee. For the record, Delegate Brian Crosby, here to present House Bill 980, Higher Education, Edward T. and Mary A. Conroy Scholarship eligibility. And the purpose of the bill is simply to provide a mandated process for verifying eligibility for the scholarship. Under the current law, there is no process to verify their students' eligibility, and so at each higher ed institution across the state, individual and non-uniform methods have kind of been used to verify eligibility, and at some point, these universities have just kind of gone off and done their own thing. And what we are trying to do is simply standardize a process for all of the applicants. Understandably, many veterans are reluctant to submit this information as the request is somewhat intrusive. And we think that having worked with those groups, standardizing the process will kind of ease a little bit of the tension around it and make it straightforward for all of the institutions in our state to process these applications. So to address that lack of uniformity regarding the verification, we simply streamline the process by using the VA's Chapter 35 Dependents Educational Assistance Program to serve as proof of eligibility. And with that, we request a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I thank you for allowing me to appear today to express my strong support for House Bill 980. My name is Toby Freevert, and I am the coordinator of military-affiliated supports and services at Towson University's Military and Veterans Center. I also was involved in the writing of the language of this bill. This bill is a critical step toward ensuring that the family members of Maryland's veterans receive the educational support that they deserve. By including all of those eligible for the Chapter 35 VA education benefit, House Bill 980 provides a vital opportunity for military families to thrive in their educational journeys, all while reducing barriers to access and reducing unnecessary privacy violations for the veterans. Our service members make tremendous sacrifices, and their families often make their own sacrifices as well. Expanding this scholarship acknowledges the support and the sacrifice of those family members and provides them with the means to pursue their educational and career goals right here in Maryland. Furthermore, by allowing schools Furthermore, by allowing school certifying officials to verify the eligibility of the applicant, the bill ensures a smoother process for applicants, reducing bureaucratic hurdles that often delay or in some cases deny access to this scholarship. In my work with military-connected individuals, I have seen firsthand how transformative educational access can be for veterans' families, and that is especially true of the Edward T. and Mary A. Conroy Memorial Scholarship. The passage of this bill will not only honor the service and the sacrifice of our military members, but empower their families as well. I urge the committee to pass House Bill 980 and continue Maryland's efforts to be the best state in the union for the military-connected community. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Okay, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing. House Bill 424, Delegate Lewis. Paul Schwartz is here as well. Favor? Come on up, Paul. From North.
Thank you. Chair and colleagues, thank you for the time today. There's a quote that I heard often in my prior profession on the Hill working for Congressman Steny Hoyer from Thomas Paine, who said that these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from their service, shrink from the service of their country. Paine wrote that in December 1776 to encourage the American colonialists to persevere in the fight for independence. And his words were meant to motivate the colonists to fight for victory. He believed that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Well, we are similarly in trying times, and I bring House Bill 1424 to encourage our residents in federal service to stay strong, to motivate them during these difficult times, and to let them know that the state will not shrink from the assignment in this hour and that we will have their back. With that, I present House Bill 1424, the Protect Our Federal Workers Act. This legislation is designed to reaffirm Maryland's commitment to our indispensable federal employees, providing them with essential protections as they face potential job losses due to the current administration's destabilizing actions. The bill proposes an expansion of the existing catastrophic event account. This expansion would authorize the use of funds to address situations involving the closure, relocation, or mass layoff within the federal government units. Specifically, the bill seeks to rename the Federal Government Shutdown Employee Assistant Loan Fund, which is a mouthful, to the Federal Government Employee Assistant Loan Fund. It would broaden the fund's purpose to offer interest-free loans to federal employees affected by unforeseen employment disruptions, not limited to government shutdowns. We are also bringing an amendment to make this bill an emergency bill to expand the authority of the Attorney General to take actions to defend residents who are in federal service, particularly those in federal service. And we're making sure to include federal employees who have taken the deferred resignation buyout, given all the guidance indicating that they will likely not be compensated. Now, why the urgency of action? The current administration, led by Elon Musk and President Trump, has initiated significant downsizing efforts within the federal agency, leading to widespread uncertainty among federal workers. And Maryland is home to approximately 142,000 federal employees, many of which spread across all of our districts, constituting about 4.6% of the state's total workforce. The potential loss of federal jobs severely threatens Maryland's entire economy. In federal fiscal year 2023, federal contract obligations for work performed in Maryland totaled $42 billion, equating to about 10% of all the state's private sector gross product. A sudden reduction in federal employment could destabilize local economies and disrupt essential services relied upon by our residents. Federal employment is a cornerstone of Maryland's economic stability, particularly in our largest jurisdictions. For instance, Montgomery County is home to National Institutes of Health and the Food and Drug Administration, employing thousands of residents. Prince George's County hosts the Internal Revenue Service and the U.S. Census Bureau, among others, another significant federal employer in the area. Anne Arundel County, Fort Meade, a major military installation which contributes substantially to the local tax base. Baltimore City, with the Social Security Administration and CMS, are key federal partners. Frederick County, with Fort Detrick, serves as a critical hub for biomedical research and employs numerous residents as well. By expanding the eligibility criteria of the Federal Government Employee Assistance Loan Fund, we aim to offer a critical safety net for federal employees facing involuntary job loss. And these interest-free loans would supplement standard unemployment benefits, ensuring that affected workers can continue to meet their financial obligations during this trying time. I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on this legislation, demonstrating Maryland's steadfast committee to our neighbors, to our citizens, and to our family members. Thank you for your consideration.
My name is Paul Schwartz. I am Vice President of the National Active and Retired Federal Employees. It's also a 37-year federal employee, and I take what's happening today personally. The dismantling of the federal workforce by the current White House and the devastation it is causing to families across the country and this state has never been seen before. These are real Maryland people with real Maryland families, and the time is now to do something to help. The federal government has had a merit-based employment system since the Pendleton Act passed in 1883 in the aftermath of the James Garfield assassination. That is, until now. I assume none of you were around in 1883, but it's still applied until now. Yes, there have been efforts in the past to privatize a good portion of the federal government, the Grace Commission under Ronald Reagan, but nothing approaching the devastation of the current efforts. What any of these efforts fail to recognize is that the goal of business may be to make a profit. The goal of government, as we all know, is to provide service, not the same thing. They say it is about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, but that clearly is not true. If it were, they would not have fired the inspector generals, and they would not have started with the probationary employees who do not yet have the merit system protections. They even fired immigration judges. The fact is that it is a good deal easier to reclassify unencumbered positions than encumbered positions, and that is the goal as spelled out in Project 2025, page 95, and Schedule F, now Schedule PC. Remove as many current employees as possible and replace them with political appointees, and thereby make it more difficult to enforce annoying regulations that hamper big business. There are fewer federal employees today than there were when the population was 2/3 of what it is today. So too many federal employees is not the issue. Getting rid of them to replace them with political loyalists is. Now, we've been focused on 2 court cases. We had some good news just yesterday. The United States District Court for the District of Maryland issued a temporary restraining order prohibiting Department of Education and OPM from disclosing personal information to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Keep in mind, we made a big deal about TikTok having access to our personal information, and here this guy is going through all the files, everything that's personal, names, social security numbers, they're having access to. We have, the victims are now, and we have to do something to help those victims, and this bill at least is a major, major step in the right direction to protect those people. I was at
Oh, we do have a 2-minute limit
all right,
for witnesses. So let me ask you a question. When did you retire?
In 2010.
2010. Do you still have friends working in the federal workforce?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's what we represent. We represent the retirees and the current feds. Yeah. So this is why NARF exists. But I take it personally because of my career. But I was at a town hall just on Friday night with Representative Hoyer, and it was all these people concerned about losing jobs or friends losing jobs or whatnot, and he said, "Thank you for your service."
Yeah.
And that stuck with me because
Paul,
he didn't say thank you for your increasing the profit margin. He said thank you for your service. That's who we're trying to protect here now.
Very clearly, Elon Musk and his actions are a threat to Maryland, a threat to the economy of Maryland, the well-being of our state. But Delegate, I congratulate you on making this really personal, because it's not just a threat to our economy, it's a threat to individuals. And that matters on a real personal and individual basis. We have talked to our Attorney General. We're trying to work hand in hand with our Attorney General on these issues and some of these potential illegal actions. He said he could use some more resources. This bill seems to fit into that. Would you be amenable to a friendly amendment to
absolutely
provide some more resources for Attorney General to file suit on some of these potentially illegal actions? Good. That's good. Delegate Jones? No? Okay. Delegate Grist.
So this is a $700 loan, and they're expecting, I think, what, 10,000 loans to be potentially handed out. What if someone doesn't repay that loan? What would happen then?
So this is amending the process that we put in place when we had a 2-month government shutdown, I want to say back in 2019 or so. Department of Labor believes that they have the resources to make sure people who are using this as an option is only because it's a last resort for them. Because it's $700, we're not that worried about whether people will not be able to. They give them flexible terms on the timeline to be able to repay, which I think is also in the fiscal note that you referred to. But it hasn't been an issue for what we already have.
So in the past during COVID, did we just write off those loans that were not paid back? Do you know? That's probably a question.
We're talking about 2 different things, because this was set up for the government shutdown, which happened before COVID. Okay. So I don't know if you're referring to unemployment insurance.
I'm just referring to anything that we potentially, other states done in the past with these small.
And we can get you numbers on COVID, Delegate, and figure that out.
I figured it was a question that Labor probably, or somebody.
Yeah, we can get it. But I think it's a really good analogy. I mean, what we saw with COVID was a fear of the worst, of what could happen with our economy and with people, and this is a similar thing that we're seeing at the federal level with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So I do think it's a very good analogy to draw. Delegate Watson?
Yes, thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill. Howard County, which I represent, is home to many 2-income, 2-federal job families, and what they've experienced in the last few weeks has been indiscriminate, chaotic, traumatic, and many families are affected more than once by 2 or even 3 household members. Will your bill address each member that's affected or by household?
I think the way the bill is structured, each person who is laid off can apply for resources. We're trying to help. I mean, if you look at per capita, California has 160,000 residents who are federal employees. Virginia has, I want to say, 155. we look at per capita, we're the most, right? So it's going to be acute for us, and we need to get ahead of this.
And they can use that for childcare or for whatever expenses that they have.
Which is a great point. You know, someone asked me, are we prioritizing some workers over others? And, you know, I framed it as these are our neighbors, these are our family members, because, you know, if they lose their job, who's going to the dry cleaners? Who's paying for, you know, taking their kids to childcare? We are already seeing, I'll at least speak for my district, of people who have been laid off, cutting back on services and other things they normally would do because they don't know if they're going to get to return to their jobs. You know, and this is the first time we've done this. We've done this for hospitality workers. During COVID, we've done something similar for manufacturing workers, similarly, also during COVID. This is a unique part of our economic family for Maryland, and I think it's what we need to do. So thank you for your question.
And I think port workers just last year, right?
Port workers last year.
Delegate Mangione's familiar with that bill, I think. Delegate Edelson.
Go back. No, I heard what you said. I heard you said something about the port, but I didn't know what you brought me into.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I specifically remember that bill. I was fortunate enough to be able to work on it, and it helped so many residents and businesses in the district and throughout the city and state. Similarly, Delegate, I think this bill will do the same, and I'm so grateful that you brought it. You know, I've had an extensive amount of outreach from my constituents that have lost and or are fearful of losing their jobs. There is no question that it has been completely across party lines. The job losses have not been partisan. And so I think it's our job to help everybody. The question that I have for you is, you know, given the extent of the losses and unfortunately the extent of increasing prices, despite the fact that we were told that wasn't going to happen with the new administration. You know, what happens if the funds in the account isn't enough? You know, I would have to imagine that $700 per person, unfortunately, is not going to go very far with the amount of costs that most Marylanders have in their daily lives, and we could exceed the 10 million pretty quickly. So, you know, my hope is that we can work on something that will provide additional resources to our constituents should the job losses exceed what we expect, and should the timeline of people being able to find new employment exceed our expectations?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Our assumption is people are going to take this in addition to unemployment insurance. So I wouldn't receive it as only that, and it's dependent upon how many people apply. You know, we're going to see how it goes, right? And if people are uniquely hurt, we'll probably have to provide more help. To your point, you know, one of the specific things I heard about was a worker who was told they worked remotely for the Minority Business Development Agency, that they were laid off. They had all their computers, all of their paperwork still at home with people's confidential information for their businesses, loan docs, whatever, you know, and it's just haphazard. One thing that I think this bill is really trying to get at too is trying to make sure that we keep the intellectual capital in Maryland that we have that makes us unique, right? So the people who are working at FDA, helping to keep our food safe, that skilled work, we want to keep it here, you know? People at the nuclear agencies, you know, that have also been affected. We want to keep that highly skilled and trained workforce in Maryland as opposed to moving to other places.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Well, Paul, I do want to thank you for your service, because you were a public servant, and we recognize that here in Maryland. And thank you so much for how many years?
37 years.
37 years of public service. And what work were you in?
I worked was at the World Trade Center for most of my career with U.S. Customs, then came to headquarters in 1998. When DHS was stood up, I went over there. And then when, after Katrina, they asked me to go over to FEMA, and I spent the last 4 years of my career at FEMA post-Katrina. I emphasize that. And I was very proud of my career. And after I retired, I used my experience, 37 years. I was director of trade enforcement. So I could tell you all about tariffs. I could tell you all about border crossings. But I used that experience writing for the Montgomery County Sentinel. I had a political column there for 6 years. I covered both the White House, the first Trump administration, and Congress. And I tried to put back into the community the experience that I gained. And what's happening now is they're forgetting about all kinds of experience. I built that experience over several years, and what they're doing now is they're saying they don't need experience. And it's really disheartening to me, heartbreaking to see what's happening.
Well, I'll just conclude with this. We understand in Maryland the positive power government has in people's lives, and we know that starts and ends with the people who work in government. And so thank you again. Delegate, thank you for the bill. That concludes the bill hearing. We move to House Bill 881, Delegate Shetty. I hope that wasn't too long. Delegate, if you have a panel, you can bring them up. I know there's a few people signed up.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I think one of our sponsor panel witnesses is virtual today, and one dropped out because of the flu. So, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, esteemed members of the House Appropriations Committee, for the record, my name is Emily Shetty, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 881. So I want you to imagine a policy that will help families access money they're entitled to, help lift families and children out of cycles of poverty, and maybe even save the state a little bit of money. That is what HB 881 seeks to do. This important piece of legislation is a step towards improving the financial stability for Maryland residents by ensuring that custodial parents receive the full benefits of child support payments to which they are entitled. Under current policies in Maryland and across the country, some of our most vulnerable families that receive assistance from the Family Investment Program often do not receive the full amount of their child support payments. Instead, this money is funneled through the state, which then only passes through about $100 per child and $200 for 2 or more children. The rest of the child support payment is kept by the state and the federal government. Additionally, child support payments are currently considered as income when calculating SNAP benefits, which also leads to a reduction in the amount provided for these vital nutrition assistance benefits, because this is a sliding scale benefit program. So I want to give you a quick example of how this issue plays out. Delegate McComas, let's say you and I were married and we had one beautiful child together. I mean, look at these genes. That would totally happen, right? And then we split up, and she is now the primary custodial parent of our child. So if I'm ordered to pay her $1,200 a month in support and Sue's income is over $560 a month. This is not a lot of money, but if she makes more than $560 a month, then 100% of the money that I pay to support our child goes right to Sue. But if she makes $558 or less, then she is eligible to enroll in TCA benefits. And at this point, instead of getting $1,200 per month for child support, she and her child would only receive $100 total from the child support payment. If we had 2 or more kids, then she gets $200. Well, what happens to the balance? The balance of $1,000 to $1,100 is kept by DHS, and part of it is sent to the federal government. So this is an issue that's super close to my heart. I'm trying to read my testimony to sort of keep it together today, forgive me. But as many of you know, because I've shared in this room, my sister and I were raised in poverty. During my childhood in North Carolina, my family and I received government assistance. I was raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to provide for me and my sister. But unfortunately, my dad was not in the picture, and he frequently chose not to pay child support that he was ordered to pay. As a result, my mother went into deep debt to keep a roof over our heads and put food on the table. Often we couldn't afford our electric bills, and I remember many nights of doing homework by candlelight. One day, my dad decided he needed to update his passport, and thankfully a federal law kicked in that required him to pay all of the money that he had owed my mom in back payments for child support. However, despite that rule, not a single penny actually came back to my mom. Years of child support payments that were owed to her went to the state and federal government, which further deepened the debt that my family owed, and it lengthened the amount of time that we went through poverty. HB 881 addresses this issue by mandating that all child support payments, 100% of them, are directly received by the family, regardless of whether they seek assistance with the Family Investment Program. In addition, this bill prohibits child support funds from being considered when calculating how much SNAP benefits a family is entitled to receive. This allows Maryland families to receive essential food services regardless of what their child support order might say they need. It's critical to provide money and services to these families that need it most and ensure that our state's most vulnerable populations have access to the assistance that they require. Ensuring that child support reaches the families it's intended for is both a moral and economic imperative. This bill alleviates financial burdens to those benefiting from necessary services that are designed to help them, not harm them. It can and will help us reduce reliance on these programs as well, which is how the state could potentially save a little bit of money while lifting families out of poverty. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor panel for joining to share more information about what's happening around the country and on this issue and why it's crucial that we address this problem here in Maryland right now. I also want to take a moment to thank the Department of Human Services, which has been working very collaboratively with me and Senator McCray, our Senate crossfile on the bill, so we can identify some potential amendments that could help significantly reduce the fiscal note that's outlined by DLS. Thank you for the committee's consideration, and I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 881. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Klingemeyer. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy at Maryland Family Network, and we're here today in strong support of House Bill 881. Temporary cash assistance is our cash benefit program for children and their caretakers in our state. 2/3 of all recipients of temporary cash assistance are children. And I want to thank this committee because in 2017, this committee really helped lead the bipartisan effort to implement our pass-through and disregard policy that we currently have in Maryland, and our chair and vice chair were co-sponsors of that policy, so we thank you very much for that. And as the sponsor stated, what that policy does currently is if a family is on temporary cash assistance and there is a child support order in place that's being paid, if the person has one child, $100 is passed through and then disregarded when calculating their TCA benefit. If they have 2 or more children, we pass through $200 and then disregard that when calculating their benefit. And the School of Social Work has done an analysis of that, and that money has been extraordinarily helpful. It's produced about 11% more in a family's income, which allows them to provide more food, clothing for school, all of the important things that we know families need. And it is also still keeping those families in deep poverty, because we know that as statutorily required, temporary cash assistance, when combined with SNAP, our state's or the federal program for food, we only meet 61.25% of the Maryland minimum living level. So these families, even with an extra $100 or an extra $200 a month, are still living far below the federal poverty line. And Maryland actually has one of the highest rates of deep poverty in the entire country. Of families living in poverty in Maryland, over half of them live at 50% of the federal poverty line and lower. And a lot of those families are on our public benefits because we simply do not provide enough for families to ever provide an economic stable household on these programs. And so what this bill does, the crux of this bill, is to get more money into the hands of low-income families and for low-income children. Other states already do this. This is something that is a national model. We very much encourage Maryland to be next. Passing through all of the child support would provide that economic stability for low-income families, which will ultimately save the state money in our other benefits. So we thank you so much for your time, and we strongly encourage a favorable report on HB 881.
Thank you. Whoever wants to testify next? Yep.
I can go next.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Ami Vora. I'm the Advocacy Director for Family Law at Maryland Legal Aid. Many of the low-income families that MLA serves have relied on TCA benefits to stay afloat during financially challenging times. TCA is often flippantly referred to as a handout, but most people that I meet are not aware that these benefits come with an enormous cost to the recipients. Federal law requires custodial parents getting on TCA to give up their right to seek child support and to give that right over to the government. The government then initiates a child support case against the non-custodial parent, and it keeps the money from that case. This policy, known as welfare cost recovery, is extremely harmful to low-income families. It allows the government to pocket money that otherwise could have gone directly to children living in poverty. In 2023 alone, Maryland took $19.2 million away from children living in poverty through these cost recovery cases. Now, the research unanimously shows that cost recovery policies destabilize low-income families, they weaken co-parenting relationships, and parent-child relationships. And a 2019 report from Maryland's owned ABLE Foundation, which was authored by the former federal commissioner for child support under the Obama administration, recommended eliminating cost recovery policies so that kids can receive all of the money paid by their parents in child support cases. Now, yes, HB 881 may have a significant fiscal impact. It may be an expensive policy to implement because it's asking the state to stop taking millions of dollars away from children living in poverty. But to do what's right, our state must prepare to absorb that cost. For decades, we've been punishing poor families for getting on TCA by robbing them of additional resources from within their family. And it's time for those immoral policies to end. The government should protect those who are most vulnerable among us, not penalize them for asking for help. And so for those reasons, we urge a favorable report on HB 881.
Thank you. Thanks for your advocacy. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes and committee members. My name is Zach Alberts. I'm the Director of Advocacy at the Center for Urban Families in West Baltimore. This is a particularly timely bill right now as the House of Representatives considers $230 billion in SNAP cuts. Already, poor children are going to be even further in the hole, and Delegate Shetty's bill will do a tremendous amount of work to help push back against that cost. As others have testified, research clearly shows a variety of benefits to passing through 100% of child support payments. One, it will help meet Governor Moore's goal to eliminate child poverty in Maryland. It improves co-parenting relationships, it increases non-custodial parental involvement, and it results in more child support payments. People will pay more money when they know that the money they're paying will end up in their children's hands, not in the government's hands. I want to take a second to talk about this from the non-custodial parent's point of view. As Ms. Vora mentioned, when you go on TCA, you are required to put the non-custodial parent on child support. When that happens and when the non-custodial parent is not working, like a huge portion of these folks aren't, the courts use a process called income imputation, where they assign your child support order as if you were earning full-time minimum wage. And so what happens immediately is you start building debt because you don't have a job, you have barriers to work, right? And immediately you start building debt. When you finally do what you want to do and support your child and get a job, the government keeps the money that you want to be paying to your child. And so what happens is the dads we serve are forced to make a terrible choice. Do I pay back my government-owed debt and deprive my child of money he or she needs, right? Or do I pay it through the formal system so I can avoid incarceration, avoid having my driver's license suspended, avoid other sanctions the department uses, but knowing that I'm supporting my child? So with that, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michelle Medeo. I'm Director of Economic Justice with the Homeless Persons Representation Project. Here in strong support of HB 881. Want to thank Delegate Shetty for your leadership on this issue and also sharing your personal experience. I've been at HPRP for 11 years and have worked with many, many families over the years who would benefit significantly from this bill. When I've spoken with families about how extra cash income would assist, families consistently say the money would go to their kids. So it would be allowing the families to purchase new shoes that actually fit, enrolling kids in after-school programs, paying rent, utility bills, the list goes on. It's no surprise that the TCA benefit falls short of meeting basic needs each month. Just to highlight this, the maximum TCA benefit for 3 people, so a parent and 2 kids, who have no other income is $750. And when you look at fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, it's over $1,900 a month. So I think it was in 2023, the Department of Human Services had 1,145 families that received TCA and still experienced homelessness. So this bill would help at reducing homelessness in Maryland by passing on the child support that's being paid to the families who are receiving TCA. It also would help when a family comes, when the parent finds a job and is trying to transition off TCA. A lot of the jobs families receive after TCA are in very low income sectors with invariable hours and schedules. So being able to have the child support that's being paid would help provide a financial cushion to help the family transition off TCA. And I also wanted to just note that child support pass-through was a recommendation made in a recent report by the University of Maryland School of Social Work that just concluded a 2-year comprehensive review of TCA, and they thought that was a very good step for Maryland to take. So thank you very much. We urge a favorable report.
The bill sponsor or the panel? Delegate Grist.
So you mentioned the $750, I think, and obviously rents and home ownership is very expensive. But in a lot of these cases, is TCA really the only resources that they're getting, or are they getting other resources on top of that as well to help them and their families?
If there is other income, like if a child receives SSI benefits, for example, Social Security or Supplemental Security Income, that child would not be part of the calculation for TCA. If the parent is working, the TCA benefit is reduced. And so I'm trying to think of other kinds of income. Child support, only $100 is passed on. So if the family has no other income, $750 is the most that family could get. If there is other income, it would be reduced according to a calculation in the statute.
What about like rental assistance and energy assistance and all the other, I mean, there's a lot of programs that are out there.
Yeah, so if the family lives in subsidized housing, which is very, very hard to access in Maryland, I think it's like a 10-year wait list just to get in to the wait list. But if the family is living in subsidized housing, right now the Department of Human Services reduces the TCA benefit by $60, which is a practice we would like to see eliminated.
And is there any guarantee, because we're talking about cash here, that they can spend it on basically anything they want, anything and everything they want? Is there any guarantee that they would spend it on food, clothes, and sort of the basic necessities?
Is there a requirement in TCA for participation that you spend it on basic necessities? There's not, but people want to have shelter and food, right? Like this is a natural thing that all of us want. And so I think these are not resources that are being spent for discretionary purposes.
But there's no guarantee that they can spend them on non-discretionary things, or non-necessity things. They can spend it on whatever they want, I guess is my question. Is that correct?
I think she answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think all child support payments, generally, the ones that are passed through to the custodial parent has the flexibility to spend as they see fit. Low-income custodial parents, as Delegate Shetty said, spend it on what they need, which is housing, food, clothing. We've also seen in, a myriad of other direct cash payment processes to low people, like COVID gift cards, as well as universal basic income tests, that when you give low income people cash, 90+% of it is spent on needs. It's a common misconception that folks are sort of buying a new TV or something. Like, if you need Pampers, you buy Pampers.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you. I believe there was a virtual witness.
There is a virtual witness.
Yeah, so she was part of our sponsor panel. She's the author of a study that came out on the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities last summer that helped illustrate this issue statewide. So I apologize for not noting that.
Diana McCaffrey is here. Diana, you have 2 minutes, and while Diana is doing her testimony, is Kaylee Schumitz here?
No, she is out with the flu, so she is unable to join.
This will be our last witness. Diana, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to testify today in support of HB 881. I'm Diana Azevedo McCaffrey. I'm a policy analyst at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a nonpartisan Research and Policy Institute in DC. And I lead our child support policy work. Our main focus is promoting changes throughout the country that direct more child support to families currently receiving TANF and that formerly received TANF. I lead a coalition of state child support advocates across the country. I provide technical assistance to advocates and other stakeholders. And with Vicki Tretzky, former commissioner of the Office of Child Support Services during the Obama administration, I've researched and co-authored several reports on this issue. A little over half of states and DC pass through some amount of current support payments and or arrears payments. The gold standard is to pass through all child support. And as of last year, Illinois became the first state to do so. By passing HB 881, Maryland can join Illinois. There's a significant body of research that supports ensuring that all child support payments reach the children they're intended for. First, studies show that pass-through policies increase families' overall income. Studies show that child support is a valuable income source, particularly for families in poverty, to meet children's basic needs like housing, food, school supplies, diapers, etc. Second, research shows that non-custodial parents pay more support when their payments are passed through to their children. Third, studies show that passing through child support payments to families can reduce the risk of child protective services involvement. This is an opportune time for Maryland to take action. There's broad consensus among parents, researchers, child support agency directors, legislators on both sides of the aisle that all child support should reach families instead of going to the government to reimburse cash assistance. And as state TANF caseloads have declined over the years, making that happen is now much more financially feasible for states. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us in your testimony. Any questions for our virtual witness? Okay, thank you all. Thanks for that, Bill Delegate. That concludes the bill hearing. Delegate Jones, House Bill 1344. I don't think there are any witnesses on this bill.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones, representing District 30A. This is simply another tool in the state toolbox to solve the child care crisis. I come before you today to introduce 1344 DGS, Assessment of State-Owned Facilities Child Care Center. This bill simply directs DGS to conduct an inventory of state-owned property that would be suitable and is available to be leased to a child care facility and provide a report to the General Assembly. As we know, many in this committee have worked on this. Maryland is in a child care crisis. Many families lack child care altogether, and those that have child care pay exorbitant monthly rates. This causes significant economic harm to Maryland families, especially women who are not able to access or can't afford it. A 2024 report outlined a clear link between access to affordable and quality child care with an increase in labor participation, which obviously affects revenues at the end of the day. In a recent Child Care in the Economy report from the Comptroller, Comptroller Learman highlighted that one of the key components causing the crisis is lack of providers. This bill seeks to address the aspect of this crisis by identifying what state-owned property is available that could be leased to providers for facilities. It's vital that Maryland does everything that we can to ensure all Maryland children have access to safe and affordable care for Maryland's workforce. This legislation is part of the solution and relieving that supply side limitations here in Maryland. I am very proud to say that this is part of the Women's Caucus priorities bills that are addressing childcare for 2025. With that, I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 1344.
Questions on the bill for the sponsor? No? Okay, thank you for the bill. You can stay there. I think you have the next bill.
Yes, sir.
That concludes the bill hearing on 1344, House Bill 865. Delegate Jones, I do think you have, yep, come on up.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the Appropriation Committee, I come before you today to introduce HB 865, Catastrophic Event Account, Transfer of Funds, State Disaster Recovery Fund. The State Disaster Recovery Fund, SDRF, was established through legislation I sponsored and this committee passed in 2023. This fund was created as a source of disaster relief for residents of the state when federal or other sources of funds are not authorized. Sustained and effective funding of SDRF is crucial in keeping Maryland prepared for all disasters. As my panel can speak to further, effective disaster response funding is directly linked to a community's ability to recover quickly and effectively from disasters. Disasters happen without warning, as we all know. In my time here serving Annapolis, I have had 2 tornadoes, more floods. Then the chief and I have stood in more standing water than we'd like to remember, for sure, and helping to clear areas together all along the way. I thank you for your partnership.
Thank you.
This bill would allow additional emergency funding to be transferred from the CEA only if the SDRF has been depleted or the estimated cost of providing adequate disaster relief for a natural disaster or a catastrophic situation are in excess of the fund's balance. Any transfer of funds would depend on emergency justification and approval. Additionally, HB 865 also proposes amending the Legislative Policy Committee, the LPC, review period for the CEA from 15 days to 5 days. This allows relief to be delivered quickly and effectively to those in need. Reducing this review period is possible due to the thorough damage assessment carried out by emergency management immediately after disasters hit. This assessment helps to evaluate the extent and severity of the physical and economic damage, identifying the unmet needs of the community as a whole. With these initial assessments already completed by emergency managers, the necessary information is readily available for review, therefore allowing the LPC to make a swift and accurate decision of the funds needed for relief efforts. It maximizes their impact. Ensuring the State Disaster Recovery Fund remains dependable and effective will enhance Maryland's ability to recover and rebuild stronger. In almost half of local disasters, Maryland must be ready to respond without federal assistance, and today we've talked a little bit about the uncertainty at the federal level. HB 865 makes sure that disaster recovery efforts will have the funds needed when Maryland's need them the most. Dr. Preeti Emmerich from MACO and Anne Arundel County Office of Emergency Management was going to be here with us today, but due to the ongoing cyber situation happening, she's unable to be with us, but I'm so appreciative to my panel who will speak to the need of this today. And with that, I respectfully request a favorable report on 865.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Delegate Jones and honorable delegates. My name is Kevin Simmons. I'm the director of the City of Annapolis Office of Emergency Management. I also serve as the president of the Maryland Municipal League's Emergency Management Officials Department, which is a coalition of municipal emergency managers, public safety professionals, and elected officials. I come here before you today in support of House Bill 865. We are joining our emergency management colleagues from the Maryland Association of Counties Emergency Management Affiliate and the Maryland Emergency Management Association in support of the bill. Now, I want to talk about how the bill affects some folks in our community. Local disasters often impact low-income and underserved communities, the least financially resilient of all our residents. This funding ability is critical. House Bill 865 will help us help the most vulnerable communities to recover from disasters, leaving no one behind. We don't truly recover until we all recover. One example of the value of the State Disaster Recovery Fund would have been the Annapolis tornado of 2021. Had the State Disaster Recovery Funds been available during that event, the city of Annapolis could have assisted many lower income, uninsured or underinsured families and seniors recover more quickly from the tornado damage to their homes. One family, the Noel Clark family, who couldn't be here today, is still recovering. Their home is not habitable for over 3 years after the tornado struck. The Noel Clark family found that the available emergency funding process at that time was confusing and very, very difficult. We believe that we are in a better position today to assist our most vulnerable communities, and that House Bill 865 will help us provide even better emergency recovery service to our citizens. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 865. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Director. Go ahead.
Hello again, Charlotte Fleckenstein, Policy Fellow with the Maryland Association of Counties, testifying in support of House Bill 865. By strengthening the state's capacity to rapidly deploy emergency resources, this bill ensures that counties can provide timely assistance if federal aid is unavailable or delayed. While the State Disaster Recovery Fund is an essential tool for governments responding to disasters and emergencies, its effectiveness does depend on adequate funding. So to this extent, the bill provides a necessary mechanism to sustain the fund by allowing for transfers from the catastrophic event account if the balance of the fund is insufficient. By creating a direct pathway between these two funds, this bill helps local governments provide immediate assistance without having to wait for uncertain federal support. Ultimately, this approach reduces financial and operation strains on communities and ensures that local governments and counties can provide swift assistance to disasters and emergencies. And for these reasons, MACO respectfully urges a favorable report on House Bill 865.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Chris Meid, and I'm the legislative co-chair of the Maryland Emergency Management Association, or the association representing emergency managers across the state. Our association strongly supports House Bill 865 because it ensures every jurisdiction in Maryland has timely access to critical disaster relief funds when they're needed most, timely being the key proponent in this. Disasters do not wait for bureaucracy. When flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, or other natural disasters strike, emergency managers use immediate resources to provide the shelter, restore infrastructure, and support recovery efforts. Under the current process for when large disasters occur in Maryland, Maryland must go through a 3-week or 15-day review process before releasing funds that may be needed from the catastrophic event account. This delay means that families have to wait longer for housing, businesses have to struggle longer to reopen, and local governments often lack the resources needed to stabilize their communities' and economies more quickly. A faster and more efficient process is essential to better meet the needs of Marylanders in crisis. House Bill 865 is not about money, it's about time. This bill does not remove oversight. It simply streamlines the process by reducing the review period from the 15 days to 5 days, ensuring that aid reaches those in need without unnecessary delays. Maryland emergency managers already follow a structured damage assessment process that was previously mentioned. This includes real-time reporting, local and state coordination, and FEMA verification. These existing safeguards ensure that the funding decisions are accurate and responsive to immediate needs. This is an important bill for the state to enact given the federal government's current focus on restructuring or deciding how disaster funds are delivered to the states. Whether it's a coastal flooding in Annapolis or other parts of the Eastern Shore, severe storms in southern or central Maryland, or winter storms in western Maryland, every jurisdiction depends on timely disaster relief. In today's political environment, delays funding jeopardizes recovery efforts even more and increases economic instability for families and businesses alike. This is a proactive, common sense solution without a bill without any new fiscal impact. Emergency managers across Maryland strongly urge this committee to give House Bill 865 a favorable report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Appropriation Committee members. My name is Alex Sperling. I'll be testifying on behalf of Preeti Emmerich, Local Emergency Manager and MACO EM Affiliate President, since she was not able to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on House Bill 865 today. The State Disaster Recovery Fund, or SDRF, was created by legislation adopted in 2023. This fund was created as a source of disaster relief for mainly individual residents of the state where federal or other sources of funds are not authorized. Sustained and effective funding of the SDRF is crucial in keeping Maryland prepared for all disasters. Effective disaster response funding is directly linked to a community's ability to recover quickly and effectively from disasters. Noting this importance, the bill proposes the Catastrophic Event Account, or CEA, supplementing the SDRF for unfunded local or individual disaster relief. The CEA is most effective when used to bridge funding gaps with the SDRF. Disasters happen without warning, and delaying temporary housing, immediate repairs, and assistance for uninsured or underinsured losses can cause damages that span years into the future. This bill will allow additional emergency funding to be transferred from the CEA if needed to supplement the SDRF. Any transfer of funds would, of course, depend on emergency justification and approval. And how can that approval and process happen in the most effective way? The bill also proposes amending the Legislative Policy Committee, or LPC, review period of the CEA from 15 days to 5 days to allow relief to be delivered quickly and effectively to those in need. Reducing this review period is possible due to the thorough damage assessment carried out by emergency managers immediately following a disaster. This assessment helps evaluate the extent and severity of the physical and economic damages, identifying the unmet needs of the community as a whole. With the initial assessments already completed by emergency managers, the necessary information is readily available for review, allowing the LPZ to make swift and accurate decisions on the funds needed for relief efforts. Ensuring the State Disaster Recovery Fund is dependable and effective will enhance Maryland's ability to recover and rebuild stronger in all disasters. This ensures all Marylanders must be able to take care of our own self, and we don't leave anybody behind. Thank you, and we urge your favorite report on this House bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the bill sponsor or the panel? Okay, thank you for the bill.
Thank you so much.
Concludes the bill hearing. Delegate Edelson, by yourself. Got this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Delegate Harris for the positive encouragement, as always. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, for the record, Delegate Mark Edelson here on House Bill 1463. This is the Transit Safety and Investment Act of 2025. Back in 2021, then Delegate, now Comptroller Brooke Learman and Senator Cory McRae introduced and got passed the Transit Safety and Investment Act, I would call it 1.0, which has been a huge, huge help to MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration. This was intended to address the $2 billion maintenance backlog and require funding at basic levels for the MTA. This bill established that from FY21 to FY28, there would be basic levels of funding for system preservation for the MTA system. This law will sunset in FY28, and it's based on the capital needs inventory levels of MTA at that time. My bill, the Transit Safety and Investment Act of 2025, will essentially continue that progress that we have made at the new capital needs inventory levels, which are coming out this year. And so that minimum level will be at the $550 per year from FY29 to FY39. And essentially, that's what it is. It's a continuation of that funding that has been so, so important to the Maryland Transit Administration. I would just note that in fiscal year 24, there were 64.3 million boardings on the MTA system. That's up 11% from the previous year. And I know that many folks associate the system only with the city of Baltimore, but to be clear, the core bus system operates in Baltimore, but extends to Perry Hall, to Catonsville, to Columbia, to Annapolis, to Kent Island, to Havre de Grace, to Bel Air. The commuter bus system includes Southern Maryland, Hagerstown, Frederick, and the MARC commuter rail system goes from Union Station in D.C. all the way to West Virginia on the Brunswick line, Perryville on the Penn line, and Baltimore on the Camden line. So really, this system impacts almost all of our constituents around the state. It is a system that we have to maintain in a basic state of good repair. That is what this bill would do. And, Mr. Chair, I'd urge a favorable report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is certainly straightforward. I guess my question is, why are we committing funds, and why are we want to tie the hands of folks who will be sitting here? Most of us probably want to be sitting here in 2035 or 2036 or 2040 or whatever. Do we not trust that in 2029 that we're going to cut this funding? Is that the reason why we're doing this?
Do we not trust that we're going to cut? Well, the idea of the initial iteration of this bill is that the previous administration funded the system at such low levels that it was running at a state of poor repair. It had a $2 billion backlog. As a result of the investments that this legislature has made through this bill, we've been able to cut down on that system maintenance backlog and get the system closer to a state of good repair. So that has shown success for us in being able to provide a much better functioning system than what was there prior to this bill. When you have a transportation system, as you well know, one of the most important things for the vitality of that system is the safety and security of knowing that the future funding will be there so that you can hire and retain talent and you can put money into procurement to be able to invest in the system for the long term. The intent of this bill is to continue those excellent investments that this legislature has made in that system. I don't know what's to come after us. I'm trying to plan for the next generation of riders on this system to ensure that they will have a safe and efficient system to use because of the incredible economic mobility that it provides for Marylanders and the economy that we're trying to boost. So in order to do that, we have to ensure that the system will have at least adequate levels of funding for the long term. That's what this bill is doing. It's saying, can we at least provide adequate levels of funding? And I would just note that this bill does not have any new fiscal impact projected for FY29. That is because our current CTP includes the levels of funding projected that this bill would require for that year. So, for that period of time, it does at least appear, as long as that funding doesn't get cut, that we will be funding the adequate levels. But what this bill is intending to do is continue that throughout so that if, frankly, there is an administration that comes off to this one that doesn't believe in public transportation the way that this one does, at least we as a legislature set a mandate for what the basic levels of funding should be for that system.
And does it continue to take money out of the Transportation Trust Fund? Is that the money that's going to be used to fund?
That's the money that we use to fund our entire transportation system.
So we're planning this commitment out another 15 years. And the concern that we have in parts of the state where we don't have trains and transit. The only mass transit we have are buses that aren't very well utilized. So we rely very heavily on our roads and bridges. So if we're going to commit ourselves out 15 years with this transportation trust money, and obviously we don't even know where that fund is going to be in 5 or 10 years from now, and that's been declining every single year. Are you concerned that we won't have the flexibility to be able to shift from maybe transit if we need for a couple of years to be able to go out and resurface, more lane miles or to go out and repair a couple bridges? Do you think that this is going to take away from that flexibility to be able to make those decisions year after year and fund what our true priorities are at that time?
No, for 2 reasons. One, because I'm sure you'll be willing to partner with me on the revenues that we'll need to fund the entire system to make sure that all of our residents have what they need. But 2, because if you look at the system right now, right, this bill was passed in 2021. It's increased the level of funding that's gone to MTA, including during these times of tough budget times. During that time, the State Highway Administration has shown that the state of our bridges in the state of Maryland has continually improved. At this point in time, we have less than 1% of our bridges in the state of Maryland that are in a state of poor condition. And by the way, that's not unsafe. That just means that one part of the bridge is in poor condition. While we've been funding this. In addition, we've been able to put approximately $1 to $1.5 billion of capital funding into the SHA budget while we've been doing this. And we've been able to maintain our state of good repair. 85% of our roads in the state of Maryland are at a state of good repair or better. So while we've been funding the MTA system at these basic funding levels to keep the system running, we've clearly had ample money to put into system preservation for the State Highway Administration budget around the state. And that has kept our bridges and our roads in a state of good repair. So what this has demonstrated is that we can do both.
Well, I hope that when the residents of Maryland are paying a lot more in taxes, hopefully that our priorities will better show that we are going to focus on system preservation with our roads. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would just note that we have been focusing on system preservation, but we also have to do what's going to boost the economy. And for every $1 you put into transit, you get a $5 return on that investment. And so for the future Marylanders who are going to pay whatever taxes we decide are appropriate, I'd like to keep those as low as possible based on the excellent investments that we make right now and in the future.
Are you the Vice Chair of the Transportation Subcommittee?
In my spare time,
Seems
Mr.
like
Chairman.
it. Delegate Stanko.
A couple of quick questions. Do you recall what, you said 11% is the year-over-year increase. Do you recall what WMATA's increase has been year-over-year in ridership?
The WMATA increase has been more significant than 11%. They are approximately back to their pre-COVID levels right now. And I suppose depending on what happens with the federal government, that could either increase or substantially decrease.
I'm just getting caught up on this bill, obviously. Are you opposed to discussing an amendment for the state to inspect or to enforce the actual process of charging riders when they get on the trains?
To inspect the process. I mean, currently the state charges riders when they get on the trains. Obviously, we have had issues, as you're well aware of, with fare evasion, but both MTA and WMATA have put in significant changes to their system to get down fare evasion. And my understanding is it's down about 82% across the WMATA system. MTA is putting similar measures into place in the system that I'm confident will have similar results.
I feel that from my personal experience that the MTA is very slow to make those necessary changes, and I think that fare box recovery numbers would provide broad data to back support that they have not done a good job with that, and that if we are going to provide additional guaranteed funding, that there should be a mechanism to make sure that the riders that are using it meet the expectations of the General Assembly.
I get that. I think at the end of the day, the purpose here is to ensure that the system is running at a basic state of good repair. That is first and foremost about safety. And so when it comes to the safety of the Maryland residents that are riding this system, that has to be sacrosanct. Same way we require the safety of the folks who are on our roads and bridges. You know, we have an extensive amount of tolls that haven't been paid in the state of Maryland, including by in-state residents. And we don't withhold the safety funding for our roads and bridges based on those tolls. So if we're going to say that something is for safety purposes, which is what this bill is, I believe that that has to be sacrosanct.
I'm yet to find a gas-powered driver that avoids the gas tax. And as of last year, we found a way to tax our EV riders for that purpose. So I think we should find a similar way to make sure our riders of transit are doing their fair share of their ride costing and making sure that we're enforcing that.
Understood. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleague and delegation mate, for bringing this wonderful bill. And I wanted to ask, would it be fair to say that part of the motivation for creating this mandate comes from the time frame last year where the CTP for this current CTP was being established, and the Department of Transportation was having to mull over how it would balance its $20 billion budget, and actually proposed about a $670 million cut to MTA. Is that so?
Yeah, yes, I appreciate the question. In the initial draft MTA budget, there was MDOT budget, there was a proposal that of the $1.3 billion shortfall in the budget, approximately $672 million in cuts would come at the hands of MTA, which would have resulted in us not funding the system at the Transit Safety and Investment Act levels required by this bill from 2021. And so in effect, if we were to have passed that budget as is, we would have had to use the BRFA system bill in order to balance the budget and underfund those levels. And so with that being a potential reality that we were facing, it became imperative for me to ensure that we mandate these basic funding levels beyond the current time frame that's in law.
Very good. And as co-chair of the Legislative Review Committee for the Transit Caucus, I've reviewed several different transit-related bills, and one of your additional bills is related to the state of good repair with the light rail system in MTA. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And
that is so.
Could you just give us a little bit of an example of what you found in your empirical visiting to the MTA, to the light rail system, and whether that played into the impetus behind this bill as well?
Sure, I'd be happy to. You know, a group of us had the honor and benefit of visiting our light rail sort of backup maintenance facilities operated by MTA. And what we saw there is that even despite the increased funding that we've been able to put into the system, the fact that there has been no really substantial investment in this system, essentially since it was built over 30 years ago, has resulted in a scenario in which our entire system is running at the minimum level of electrical substations, which would mean that if one of those substations no longer functions, significant portions of the entire light rail system would no longer function, including what could be the BWI spur, which we use for a substantial amount of economic movement in and out of the state of Maryland. And so when we recognized just how much this system is running on, MacGyver level duct tape and gum in some places, we understood that this system has to be funded at higher levels. And that's part of the purpose of my other bill, which is to allow us to use federal Garvey bond proceeds to do the once-in-a-generation complete overhaul of the system, which will include the mechanical substations. But the purpose of this bill is to ensure that we mandate the minimum levels of funding for the system to run at a level of good repair, ensuring the safety of the 64.5 million boardings, folks who boarded the system in 2024, and hopefully even more this year.
Well, I appreciate you for championing this bill. I encourage all of us to support it, and knowing and recognizing that the children of Baltimore City primarily are able to get to school because of the bus system in Baltimore City and the imperative need to ensure that it is in a state of good repair. I just urge everyone to really consider this bill favorably. So thank you, Delegate, for your work.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
Any other questions? And that concludes the bill hearings. Good job, Delegate. Delegate Spiegel, and you have a panel, I think, and we do, I think, have an interpreter. Yes. So we want to put the interpreter next to sort of the witness so that the camera can pick up both, if we can possibly do that.
Okay. So who needs an interpreter? Where did he, this is Mandy, she's the interpreter. Who needs the interpreter? Brant. Okay. So she can sit. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Ryan Spiegel in support of HB 678. This is a pretty striking statistic to me. Over 1.2 million Marylanders are deaf or hard of hearing. That's 1 in 5 Marylanders across the state. And the Maryland Deaf Culture Digital Library, which is a part of the state library agency, serves that population with a first-of-its-kind library, hosting one of the largest collections of books and resources related to deaf culture in the United States, and its utilization is increasing year after year. The Maryland State Library Agency is required by law to fund the Deaf Culture Digital Library from its operating budget, but no additional funding has been provided to meet the rising operational costs, which now exceed current funding. The governor's proposed budget recognizes the need for additional resources in fiscal year 2026, but the Deaf Culture Digital Library is still in need of a long-term funding solution, and House Bill 678 will provide that long-term solution with $450,000 annually to the Deaf Culture Digital Library. Now, because the budget already includes most of that funding on an annual basis, the fiscal note for this bill is actually only $49,000. And the required appropriation does not actually take effect until fiscal year 2027. I will also note that the Senate crossfile sponsored by Senator Nancy King has already unanimously passed the Senate this year. Without this funding, the Deaf Culture Digital Library will be forced to cut services and programs and personnel, and there will be a direct negative impact on Maryland's deaf and hard of hearing community. I'm pleased to be joined today by a panel of some terrific advocates for the Maryland Deaf Culture Digital Library, including our state librarian, and I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 678. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, Delegate Spiegel, and the many members of this committee who have already signed on to co-sponsors of this bill. We very much appreciate that. As Delegate Spiegel shared, there are 1.2 million Marylanders in the state who are deaf and hard of hearing, and unfortunately, they are also some of the communities who are most underserved in our state. We work in partnership with the Governor's Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and the Department of Disabilities to provide equitable access to services, resources, programs, and training, not only for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, but for the people who provide services and support to them directly to improve their daily lives, including librarians. Earlier this year, I was speaking at the Citizens for Maryland Libraries Conference, and a woman who is 90, can't walk, and is deaf, traveled all the way across the state to speak with me, to ask me to do more for DCDL. And when I sat down to ask her to explain to me the challenges that as a deaf advocate she was experiencing, she shared that we just don't have a voice at the table. And so as state librarian and as the leader of our DCDL, we are dedicated to amplifying their voice. As Delegate Spiegel shared, since our inception a decade ago, DCDL has been funded by our agency as required by law with an annual allocation of $235,000, which was enough to get us up and running. But we've lived up to our mission, and now we are seeing usage increasing by nearly 80%, which is something for us to celebrate, coupled with rising personnel and resource cost. This initial investment is no longer able to meet the needs of the service and its users, and by next year, our costs are projected to reach $442,000. We've attempted to fill the gap by using our limited and now somewhat precarious federal funding, but that's just not a good long-term solution, and doing so also strains our ability to provide funding to the 24 county public library systems throughout the state. So I'll thank you again for your support of all of Maryland's libraries and librarians and ask for a favorable report for HB 678.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Sutherland. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. Our library system's mission is to build relationships that support discovery by providing equal access to opportunities and experiences. The Maryland Deaf Culture Digital Library is a vital partner to our library system and the public, academic, and university libraries across our state. It's estimated that more than 18,000 Prince Georgians are deaf or hard of hearing. The DCDL ensures that those Prince Georgians and all Marylanders in the deaf community have access to the collections, resources, and services that reflect their experiences and needs. Additionally, DCDL provides expert guidance to librarians and library workers across the state, which enhance our library system's offerings and services for the deaf and hard of hearing customers. This is particularly significant because each individual library system may only have a few staff members who are fluent in ASL. My fellow panelists have spoken to what would happen if funding for the DCDL is not increased. Prince George's County Memorial Library System is deeply committed to ensuring access to information for all community members, and we rely heavily on our expert partners at DCDL to meet that commitment. I thank you for your consideration of this important legislation and urge the committee to issue a favorable report for HB 678.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Brant Van Unen, and I'm the library coordinator for the Maryland Deaf Cultural Digital Library. I'm here to talk to you in support of HB 678. The funding is critical for the library. We have committed to providing efficient services to deaf and hard of hearing community, and we want to continue to do so over the years. But we have grown. We have had increased usage from all over the state. One example, our website videos and our resources, the number of people who have accessed that has doubled between fiscal year 22 and 24. Our collections, our services, and resources are all growing as well. And as a result, we believe that our work is having a positive impact on the deaf community and improving the world for our customers and those around them. With those improvements comes more costs, and that with costs predicted to increase accordingly. It is vital for DCDL to receive the funding that we need to provide those services for the deaf and hard of hearing community. We're living in uncertain times, and historically marginalized groups are more vulnerable. Without access to the community and resources, the community suffers. And that experience will also impact Maryland as a whole. DCDL improvements are vital for the deaf community as a whole. Increasing state funding will allow us to do that, and without it, the people that we serve will suffer. Thank you.
Are there any questions from members of the committee for the witnesses and sponsor? Delegate Lewis.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a statement. It's great to see you, Megan. I do a lot of work with the Prince George's County Public Libraries, and thank you and staff for the remarkable work you do. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ricardo Lopez here. Ricardo Lopez. Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for being here. If you want to provide your testimony, too.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, delegates, for having me. My name is Ricardo Lopez. I am a lifetime resident of Maryland. And I also am the media services coordinator for the School for the Deaf in DC. We serve students all over the USA, and we are committed to providing better services for deaf and hard of hearing people all over the US as we are mandated by Congress to do. We serve all of the USA and their territories. So as a lifelong Marylander, I've seen how the DCDL library has impacted our community. Before I became a librarian, I saw a lot of frustrations with accessing information in libraries and traditional libraries. I couldn't find anything regarding my community nearby. So I was very excited when the group set up DCDL, and it was successful. And now I see the growth and everything that's coming from it. And I can see how that technology is really changing very quickly. And so we have virtual reality, we have new apps that are being developed, there's things with AI included, a multitude of things. So of course, all of those things include costs. And the people who are involved with using these tools need training. They're going to need to hire more people so they can provide better services all over the state of Maryland. So myself, as a person who lives in Maryland and a librarian, I fully support funding DCDL because it benefits not only the people of Maryland, deaf people in Maryland, but students K through 12, and not even Maryland, but other schools. Also, people who work in government. They might work in different places and they have that benefit of going and seeing how deaf people live and getting that information. They use DCL. That's a central place. It's a hub where all of that information is. It has been a huge benefit to our community. So we ask that you support the funding so that it can continue. Thank you so much.
Great. Much. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for the panel and the bill sponsor? Great, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 678. The committee will now move on to House Bill 1080, Delegate Griffith, Local Government, Local Personnel, Leave with Pay. Delegate Griffith, if you have your panel, you can bring them up with you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, with your permission, and I've never done this before, but my chief of staff has put a lot of work into this bill. Would it be okay if she introduces the bill?
Sure, if you'd like to, okay.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity, and members of the committee. It is great to be here today. For the record, my name is Shariah Yousefi, and I am the Chief of Staff for Delegate Griffith. We are here today to ask a favorable report on HB 1080, Local Government, Local Personnel, Leave with Pay. As the esteemed members of the committee might recall, during the 2024 legislative session, the Maryland General Assembly passed the Time to Serve Act of 2024 that increased the number of days of annual military paid leave in a 12-month period from 15 to 30 days for all Maryland state employees who serve in a reserve component of the uniformed services. At the same time, the legislation also increased from 15 to 30 days the disaster service leave for members of specific organizations who meet specific American Red Cross criteria. While the delegate here was very thankful for this extension and happy to support the initiative, the legislation unintentionally let out one subcategory of qualified individuals, those who work for a local and/or municipal government. An example of this is a deputy that works for a local sheriff's department, but also might serve in the reserves. Therefore, this bill before you today is a simple enabling piece of legislation that will allow, if they so choose, local and municipal governments to offer these same extensions present at the state level for the qualifying employees. By allowing this provision to be extended to local and municipal employees, the playing field will be leveled between members of qualifying units, and that, in turn, will prevent disparity among state and local employees. This is a simple fix, but one that holds significant implications for those that it actually impacts. On a more administrative note, there are two amendments before the committee that I would ask your consideration as you deliberate on this bill. They are both technical. One just clarifies that this is an enabling piece of legislation, and one clarifies the extension of the 15 to 30 for the disaster service leave. I also would like to thank the Maryland Military Coalition for bringing this bill forward and share that it has been cross-filed in the Senate by Senator Jennings. Thank you for this opportunity, and I yield the time.
Thank you. Chair Chang and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Delegate Griffith's bill. I'm Dave Dragic, a retired Army colonel and the legislative director of the Maryland Military Coalition. The coalition strongly supports HB 1080 as it will level the playing field between National Guard and reserve units in Maryland, where there are service members who are employees of the state of Maryland and employees of a local jurisdiction or municipality. Last year, we supported the Time to Serve Act when it was heard before this committee. At that time, we also encouraged the committee to consider enabling legislation to address the disparity between state and federal government employees. HB 1080 corrects that problem. Absent this legislation, members of the Guard and Reserve who are employees at the local government level will continue to be at a disadvantage because they will only have 15 days of disaster service leave or 15 days of annual military leave. In case of military leave, this forces them to use personal leave to attend any schooling that is part of their career development and for the potential for promotion. The act last year increased both types of leave for state employees to 30 days. The Maryland Military Coalition sees no reason why this bill this year shouldn't do the same for employees at the local government level who are members of the Guard and Reserve and serve alongside state employees in these units. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports HB 1080 and asks for a favorable report from this committee. And we would like to thank Delegate Griffith for sponsoring this bill and his support of the uniformed services, especially those who will be positively impacted by this bill.
To the witness, questions from the panel. Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill. Just a quick question procedurally. It looks like MML is favorable with amendment, and there's language in there that looks like it covers the piece that you were referring to. Are you comfortable with that language, or is there a separate sponsor amendment that you can share with us?
Yeah, we've shared the amendments with the committee, and we've shared the amendments with the committee, and we consider that favorable, so yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions from members of the committee? Great, thank you. We also have Bill George here with the Maryland Municipal League. Bill here.
He shared that if he could be here, he would. He's testifying, I believe, but he and I had connected, and they are good with supporting the bill as amended with the amendments that we have shared with the committee.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 1080. The committee will now move on to House Bill 809, Delegate Griffith, out-of-home placement providers, maximum number of children exemption. We have also Stephen Arcerno with the ARC of Northern Chesapeake Region, and Teresa Hessler here with the Maryland Association for Resources for Families and Youth. Bill sponsor?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, representing Hartford and Cecil counties, and I'm requesting a favorable report on HB 809, the out-of-home placement providers maximum number of children exemption. So right now, there are a number of laws that restrict the number of foster children maybe in different environments. For example, in an in-home placement, that number is capped at 2, with the only exemption being for siblings. What's happening now in some of these circumstances is, as children reach the age of going to college, they're faced with a decision. Do I go to college, and then when I come back for holiday break or summer break, the home or the environment that I've become accustomed to and feel safe in and supported in is no longer there, because when I go away to school, that bed gets filled. So therefore, when I come back from college, I'm placed in a random setting. So what this bill seeks to do is extend the exemption for additional beds in a foster care situation for someone who is going to college. So when the student, so I'm a former foster kid, right? And my situation was, you know, I couldn't figure out college for issues like this, so I ended up going to the Marine Corps to get out of foster care and establish myself. But for the children who wanted to pursue the secondary education, when you're a foster kid and you leave home, there is no going back, right? That bed's gone, right? So now, and this situation happened in Hartford County, a girl had to choose between going away to school, going to the University of Maryland, or keeping her foster home. Guess what? She chose her foster home. Right, because it was more important to her to have a safe, loving, stable environment than pursuing her education, right? And this is an oversight in the law. This isn't something we did intentionally. We want to close this loophole to extend an additional opportunity. Now, obviously, under the bill, both the child and the home would have to mutually agree upon this, right? This isn't something that would be mandated for anybody. The child won't have to go back, and the home would be have to be willing to bring that child back into their home during holiday breaks and during summer breaks. But this would then, you know, eliminate the false choice that some foster kids have to make between trying to get their education and keeping their safe, loving environment. So that's all this seeks to do. There is no physical note. And the reason why is because one provider, either in-home or at-home, whatever the case may be, would be being compensated for the time the student is in the home during the holiday break or the summer. So someone's being compensated for the child's welfare while they're in one of these placements. So the physical note would be 0, because this money's going somewhere. It might as well go to a place where the student feels loved and supported versus some, not that they wouldn't be loved and supported somewhere else, right? But where there's a relationship and a place they want to return back to for the holidays and certainly for summer breaks and things of that nature. And also, one thing I do want to talk about, I think this will also help solve in some cases too by extending some of this. It may also start tackling some of the issues we have with hospital overstays. That's an issue we're starting to see bubble up too. So this could also help ease some of the pressure on hospital overstays for foster children that are stuck in a hospital environment as their basically foster home. So with that, I welcome any questions, and I urge a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Steve Acerno, and I'm the Director of Family and Children's Supports at the ARC Northern Chesapeake Region. I'm here today to advocate on behalf of college students in the foster care system and ask for your support. To illustrate the value of House Bill 809, I'd like to share the story of just one of the youth that our program had the privilege to serve over the years. This youth, like so many others in the system, suffered from abuse and neglect, witnessed family violence, separation from siblings, battled through severe anxiety and depression, and many other hardships. Despite all this adversity, this youth still had the ambition, desire, and determination to seek out higher education. This youth had the mental fortitude to hope and to dream. This youth, standing on the threshold between adolescence and adulthood, dared to visualize a path to success and attempt to end the cycle of loss and heartache. But there was a roadblock to this path. Regulation that is currently in place all but forces a choice between maintaining a connection to home and family or education and community. If they choose higher education, they essentially forfeit the certainty of a loving and caring home. They can live on campus, but when campuses are closed, will suffer again from housing instability. If they choose to remain in their foster placement, they forego the chance to form a new sense of community, this time on a college campus. By supporting this bill, this committee will help ensure that every college student who's in the foster care system has a home base, a foundation of support, love, and nurturing that will sustain them during their college experience. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Teresa Hessler, and I am here today representing the Maryland Association of Resources for Families and Youth, also known as MARFI. We express our strong support for House Bill 809. MARFI members are organizations that provide foster care, group homes, and critical services to Maryland's most vulnerable children, those placed out of their homes due to abuse, neglect, severe mental health, and medical needs. Our programs across the state support youth who have faced unimaginable challenges, and we are committed to ensuring that they have every opportunity to thrive. This bill is a step in that direction. It recognizes that young people who leave their foster care placement to pursue higher education should never have to choose between their academic goals and having a safe, welcoming place to return to when campuses close for scheduled breaks or temporary absences. Many of these young adults have no permanent family to return to, making it critical that the out-of-home placements they left behind remain available to them. By providing an exemption to placement limitations for these students, House Bill 809 helps to ensure they can focus on their education without the added burden of housing insecurity. Stability is the foundation for success, and this bill acknowledges that for many young people in foster care, their group home or foster placement is more than just a residence. It is their support system and their home base. We ask this committee to support House Bill 809 so that Maryland's foster youth can pursue higher education with the confidence that they have a place to return to, a place that wants them, welcomes them, and supports them. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Very much the bill sponsor and witnesses. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Delegate Shetty.
Thank you so much, Mr. First, I want to thank the bill sponsor for this work. I know that this is a deeply personal issue for you, having grown up in this system, and you and I, over the years working together, have had many a conversation about what your life experience was like. So I know this is coming from a place of love for these children and making sure that they always have a safe place for them to go. So I really appreciate that. I want to give you an opportunity, if possible, to speak to the DHS info testimony that was submitted for the record. They reference in here their full, wholehearted support for the intent, which I think is really great. And also reference some very, very recent regulations promulgated in December regarding the upper limit on the number of children that could be assigned to a specific home, including discretion for department directors where needed. And they sort of specifies here that part of the reason for this balance is ensuring that that same balance that you're hoping to get, right? Of like making sure that the kids have a safe, warm place to be home, but that they also want to make sure that it is in fact a safe place and that there are adequate resources there to support each of the children that are placed there. Can you speak to any efforts that you've had at trying to address some of their concerns about ensuring that the department directors maintain some of this flexibility still where needed? And would you be open to amendments that would clarify, again, sort of centering that need for the safety and love and care of the child, that the department, local departments who have a very close eye on the safety of these children have the ability still to provide some discretion?
Absolutely, and thank you, Delegate, for the kind words. I appreciate that. And I'm a little embarrassed I did not bring this up in my testimony. We started working on these issues around the same time DHS did, and we've been in constant contact with them through the process as they've started to roll out regulations alongside us working on this bill. So I don't want to misspeak, but my conversations with them, they have been supportive of the bill. They are supportive of us codifying the work they're doing. They do have some technical amendments to make sure that we are not competing or undoing their work. So we are waiting for those amendments in the technical language, and we are going to look at those technical amendments as favorable. So make sure we're codifying their good work and make sure we're solving this issue. So yes, we've been in contact with them the entire way, constant meetings and phone calls. Again, I apologize for not bringing that in my testimony. I meant to offer that in my testimony. It's a great question, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you, Delegate Shetty. Are there any other questions? Delegate Schindler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Delegate Griffith, for bringing this to us. As a former foster parent, I really appreciate what you're trying to do here. My only question for you is just one, to make sure we don't create another inadvertent loophole. And is this, we have the term higher institution in your bill there. Is that cover trade schools or service years? Do you know? Would that make sure that that would include foster children that would pursue a path like that?
The intent is to include trade schools, higher education, things of that nature, yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Schindler. Any other questions from members of the committee? Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 809. The committee will now move on to House Bill 450, presented by Delegate Geitlin, Maryland Transit Administration Disability Reduced Fare Program, renewal for permanently disabled individuals, and it's jointly assigned to the Environment and Transportation Committee. And this afternoon, we have joining us from the committee, Delegates Morgan and Delegate Stewart. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And with your permission, I would like to have the ARC, and we've got people in go already up here, join me. So for the record, I'm Delegate Michelle Guyton, Baltimore County, District 42B, and I'm here to present House Bill 450, another beautiful bill for me that costs you nothing, right? We like that in appropriations, I hope. But this bill also does what I believe, and I know many of you believe, because I know your hearts, government should do, which is support the people who need our support without placing unnecessary barriers in front of them, right? So this bill simply eases the burden of people with permanent disabilities who use public transit, right? By not requiring them to apply every year or every 3 years, dependent on their disability. So currently, there is a program where folks with disabilities can get a card and can buy reduced fares for public transit, but they have to certify, some of them every year and some of them every 3 years, that they are still disabled. And to do that, you have to go to the doctor, and then you have to fill out the paperwork. And on the list, just for an example, on the list of some of the things that you need to recertify according to our state government are things like
are you still an amputee? Right? Some of these things just don't make sense. So we bring this bill to you, House Bill 450, to ensure that a person with a disability is not expected to go to the doctor and to get recertified to prove that they have a permanent disability if they've proven it once, and that they are automatically renewed for this discount card. Thank you very much. I request a favorable report on House Bill 450.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Rice. I am the Executive Director of People on the Go Maryland, which is Maryland's statewide self-advocacy organization ran for and by those with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. We are here to testify in strong support of HB 450, which would allow for a permanent disability designation for those who are permanently disabled to avoid recertification for paratransit and other services. As the delegate rightly said, this creates an unnecessary administrative burden for doctors and people with disabilities and their supporters, because you have to figure out, how am I going to get to the doctor? The doctor has to figure out, for example, how do I answer certain questions? Like I get asked, how many feet can you wheel yourself? I don't know that. And the doctor doesn't know that. And quite frankly, I get asked by him, why do I have to recertify this for you and for people like you? So we see this as reducing the administrative burden, providing needed supports, and frankly, it's just common sense. So thank you, Delegate Guyton, for your continued leadership, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Andy Culp, and I'm the Executive Director of the ARC Maryland. The ARC is a statewide advocacy organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. And we believe House Bill 450 will reduce unnecessary burdens for people with disabilities and, as Matt said, reduce MTA administrative time that's currently spent on recertifications of riders with permanent disabilities, thus fulfilling our charge to modernize and streamline our systems. So all states are different in their processes for recertifying people with developmental disabilities. In Maryland, the maximum period for which a person can be certified is 36 months. In both Washington, D.C. and New York, individuals are required to certify on at least a 5-year basis, while there are many states that for whom reduced fare transit is allowed for people with permanent disability status without the need for recertification. Take Washington State, Puget Sound Regional Reduced Fare System. Permanent permits are issued to people with obvious physical impairments, meeting one or more medical criteria from a list, including people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people with traumatic brain injury, and people with serious, persistent, chronic mental health diagnoses. For a person to be diagnosed with a developmental disability, the disability must manifest before the age of 22, it must continue indefinitely, and it must substantially limit one or more major activity on an ongoing basis. So this makes sense, and it's good policy to make this change, not only for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but for people with other permanent disabilities as well. And for this reason, we encourage a favorable report on House Bill 450 and thank the sponsor for bringing this matter up for your consideration. Thank you.
And also the witnesses, do we have any questions from members of the committee or our guests who are here? Great, thank you very much. We also have 2 virtual witnesses. We could pull them both up. Daria Pugh with the Disability Rights Maryland. Also Ronza Othman with the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland. Okay. We have Daria Pugh who is joining us.
Hello, sorry for the technical difficulties. Thank you, Chair Barnes and Vice Chair Chang and the Appropriation Committee members for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 450. And a special thanks to Delegate Guyton for supporting this bill and recognizing the importance of affordable and accessible public transportation. I'm Daria Pugh, an attorney with Disability Rights Maryland. DRM defends and advances the civil rights of Marylanders with disabilities. DRM supports House Bill 450, which requires the Maryland Transit Administration to automatically renew reduced fare certification for Marylanders with permanent disabilities. MTA's reduced fare program lowers the financial burden for people with disabilities to access public transportation, making it easier for them to move about their communities, attend school, work, religious services, and medical appointments. Currently, transit riders with permanent disabilities must recertify their disability status every 3 years to maintain their reduced fare certification. House Bill 450 requires MTA to make that renewal automatic for people with permanent disabilities. DRM supports House Bill 450 because it reduces the administrative burden for transit riders with permanent disabilities. Every step in the renewal process poses a risk that a person with reduced fare certification may lapse. A reduced fare certification lapse could be detrimental to an individual's health and well-being. It could mean choosing between paying for a fare to go to work or a grocery store, or missing a doctor's appointments because they cannot maintain or afford both the full fare and the copay. House Bill 450 removes that burden for transit riders with permanent disabilities. This legislation is a crucial step forward to enhancing the quality of life for Marylanders with disabilities by ensuring uninterrupted access to affordable public transportation. For these reasons, Disability Rights Maryland supports House Bill 450 and requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Pugh? Okay, great. Thank you very much. And try one more time for Ronza Uthman. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 450. The committee will now move on to House Bill 941. Delegate Tolles, University of Maryland Eastern Shore Land Grant Institution Funding, Land Grant Equity and Accountability Act. Delegate Tolles.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang and members of the committee. Oh, I'm sorry, should I get started? Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to testify for the second time regarding the Land Grant Equity and Accountability Act, which addresses funding disparities between the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and the University of Maryland College Park. As per the letter that was issued in the previous administration under the Department of Education and Department of Agriculture in September 2023, the second Morale Act of 1890 mandated states to establish a second land grant institution for Black students to ensure equitable distribution of funds between 1862 and 1890 land grant institutions. So what is the Morale Act? And I think it's in the bill. Essentially, in 1862, land grant colleges were established in the United States, and that act was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln on July 2nd, 1862. My dad's birthday, not 1862, but July 2nd. It passed in Congress, but in 1890, it was known that there was, obviously an issue where, African Americans could not attend those land grant institutions. And so in 1890, the second Morale Act included the stipulation that African Americans were to be included in the United States land grant university higher education system without discrimination. The issue becomes it wasn't funded the same. Shocker. And this bill, HB 941, seeks to rectify the funding the funding disparity that has persisted from at least as early as they can account from 1987 through 2020 by requiring the governor to include a specific appropriation for UMES in the annual budget until a certain total amount is reached. UMES is a public 1890 land grant HBCU that embraces diversity. It opened its doors in 1886, initially known as the Delaware Conference. When it was initially known as the Delaware Conference Academy, under the auspices of the Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1890, UMES became known as Morgan College. In that same year, the federal legislation passed to support that HBCU that offer instructions in agriculture and related fields. And so with the adoption of the Morale Act, the Morgan rural Somerset County started receiving funding through the state of Maryland. And eventually rechristened itself into Princess Anne Academy. The federal source of money was created as a relationship with the Maryland Agricultural College, now University of Maryland College Park, my alma mater, and the Morgan College, which ultimately became UMES, located in Princess Anne, Maryland. And so it is important to note that UMES had received the same level of funding per student as the University of Maryland College Park during this period. It had not received the same level of funding. So an additional $321,181,312 would have been available for UMES. So since 2023, we have a new administration. What has happened since 2023 and 2025? The Trump administration eliminated the 1890 land grant scholarships, significantly impacting the accessibility of higher education for students attending UMES, the only land grant institution in the state of Maryland. There are 19 of them around the country. And these funds are a critical tool in addressing historical underfunding and ensuring that UMES has necessary resources to invest in research, faculty development, infrastructure. Given the well-documented disparities in funding from 1890, since their inception, it is even more important now to codify UMES into state law. When I came to you last year, it was just trying to make it whole. Now we have students across the state of Maryland, scholarships, who have been completely eliminated because of the administration, and this just in February, early February, eliminated those scholarships from those 19 institutions that was receiving funding. And so Maryland, we need to do all we can to keep that commitment from the former secretary to ensure that our land grant institution is made whole. And so last night I did find out that one of the representatives, I believe she is from one of the other states that have a land grant institution, worked to try to restore the funding and to reopen those applications for those students. But in closing, not only do we have this disparity, we now have students who will be at risk of not being able to attend college at UMES. I want to thank Governor Moore for continuously putting the funding in there since this letter came out. So last year and this year, he put the funding in there. But with the cuts that's being done under this current administration, our students in Maryland are doubly impacted. And so I urge this committee to have a favorable report for HB 941. And thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Vice Chair.
Delegate Tolles, are there any questions for Delegate Tolles? Delegate Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleague.
Yes.
This is a very important bill. By my estimate, it would take us 64 years to pay back this debt. Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
And that's just if
Delegate.
it's funded at the lowest level that's mandated in the bill?
That is correct, Delegate.
Well, you know, I've always believed in the phrase justice delayed is justice denied, but I hope that we will all consider potentially upping that minimum number to hurry up that day where our very important land-grant institution in our state is made whole for the disparity that was created over all these many years. And is it also true that this is a Black Caucus priority bill?
Yes, it is a Black Caucus priority bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's important. And can I add something else, Mr. Vice Chair? It is a Black Caucus priority bill, but I want it to be known that Princess Anne sits in one of the rural areas of our state, in one of the lowest, earning levels in our state. What does that mean? It's not just Black folks that go there. It's individuals that live in that community, live in Princess Anne, that can also be recipients of scholarships and other funding that is available for those students. And I also want to add to the first point that you add, Delegate, I think you bring up a good point. That's if we do $5 million. The bill also states that we can do at least $5 million. So the goal should be that we know we are facing a budget shortfall. We understand that, and we can sympathize with that. But perhaps by codifying this and trying to make this institution whole, you can start off with $5 million for at least a few years and then be able to up it to try to get to that 64 million, whatever that number was, 64 years to shorten that 64-year time frame a bit. So thank you for that question.
Is UMES bringing this bill forward for us? Because I didn't.
I'm sorry, can you pull your microphone a little closer?
Sure. UMES, they're not here to testify in favor, and they didn't send a letter in support. Are they, where are they at on this bill?
Oh, they absolutely support it. And I apologize. You all know our good friend, Senator Mathias, is actually meeting with folks on the Hill right now. So he's meeting with Senator Van Hollen and others on the Hill because obviously what just happened a few weeks ago with the funding that these students were receiving has been decimated. So the president and her team last year came to speak in favor of this bill, and so there's no change from last year. It's the same exact bill. So I apologize that the letter wasn't in there, but we can get you a letter of support if you would need that.
Are there any other questions from this committee? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 774. The committee will now move on to House Bill 607, Delegate Taylor from the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the Parent Grant Program established.
Good afternoon. Hello to Chair and Mr. Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Kim Taylor, representing Prince George's County's District 23, and I think this is the first time I've been before you guys. Not sure, but I think that's the case. House Bill 607 is a Black Caucus priority and seeks to establish a grants program for students pursuing a career in the appraisal industry. As we are all aware, the real estate appraisal industry is an essential part of Maryland's housing market. In 2022, the Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity was established to address the persistent misvaluation of property owned by Black Marylanders. The task force has finished its work and has several recommendations that seek to remove unnecessary educational barriers that prevent many capable individuals from entering the appraiser industry, particularly those from underrepresented neighborhoods. As recommended by the task force, HB 607 establishes a grants program that provides financial assistance to minorities who seek to become licensed real estate appraisers. This initiative will help diversify the appraisal field by creating a pipeline of potential appraisers that reflect the communities they serve, leading to more equitable property valuations. The Maryland Higher Education Commission will oversee the implementation of the grants program, and we are leaning toward having this important grant be housed under the Promise Scholarship umbrella. This, again, is a Black Caucus priority and is a direct response to the longstanding inequities in the real estate appraisal industry and is a critical step toward addressing historical disparities in home valuation and property ownership. I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, we have a witness who is providing testimony for favorable with amendments, Scott DeBazio, the Appraisal Institute.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Scott DeBazio. I'm here today on behalf of the Appraisal Institute, the largest organization of professional real estate appraisers, and we're in strong support of House Bill 607. This bill would create a grant program to assist people from historically underrepresented communities who want to become real estate appraisers. We appreciate Delegate Taylor for bringing this bill that emanated from the Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity, a task force that this body created in 2022. We also appreciate Delegates Taylor and Holmes for taking a strong interest in appraisal issues over the last several years. As introduced, the grant program that would be created would pay for the costs of the practical applications of real estate appraisal, which is a technology-based alternative way for someone to gain the experience, the practical hands-on experience training to become a real estate appraiser. POREA was incorporated into the COMAR by the Commission on Appraisers, AMCs, and Home Inspectors a few years ago. Gaining practical experience in real estate appraisal is the second prong of the 3 requirements to become an appraiser. The other 2 legs are education and the passing of an exam. So POREA, traditionally aspiring appraisers have had to find a real in-person supervisor to take them under their wing. However, people from historically underrepresented communities have had a disproportionately more difficult time in finding supervisors who will take them under their wing and train them. So POREA is an attractive online program for people of color that want to become appraisers. As I mentioned, experience is the second prong of the appraisal licensing process, and if people can't get through the qualifying education because it's cost prohibitive, they may never actually get to POREA. So we're working with the sponsor to amend her bill to include the costs of the required qualifying education. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeBazio. Are there any questions for the witness? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 607. The committee will now move on to 609. Stay right there, Mr. DeBazio. And we have the Legislative Scholarship Program, Eligibility and Use Real Estate Appraisal Program.
Okay, thanks again, Mr. Chair and members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Kim Taylor, representing Prince George's County's District 23, and I'm here to present House Bill 609. Which expands the eligibility and permitted uses of Maryland's legislative and senatorial scholarship programs to support students pursuing careers in the real estate appraisal industry. As economic shifts and housing market challenges persist, the demand for qualified real estate appraisers continues to grow. Accurate appraisals ensure fair property valuations, protect homeowners from predatory practices, and contribute to a stable housing market. However, the pathway to certification is often costly and inaccessible to many Marylanders, particularly for individuals from underrepresented communities. House Bill 609 addresses this issue by allowing recipients of senatorial and delegate scholarships to use their awards toward appraisal licensure course requirements, whether they are seeking a degree or not. Students could also use the scholarships toward costs relative to simulation options offered under the Practical Applications of Real Estate Appraisal POREA program, which was authorized by the Maryland General Assembly a few years ago. This expansion aligns with recommendations from the Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity, which emphasized the need for financial assistance to increase diversity in the field. By broadening scholarship eligibility, House Bill 609 strengthens Maryland's workforce development initiatives, expands access to career-focused education, and promotes equity within the real estate industry. This is a practical step towards economic mobility and housing equity, and I urge a favorable report on House Bill 609. Thank you.
Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, for the record, my name is Scott DiBiasio. I'm here today on behalf of the Appraisal Institute, and like House Bill 607, we are in strong support of House Bill 609. I'll be very brief in just saying that my comments on this bill are exactly the same as they were on House Bill 607, that the scholarship money should be also used to pay for the costs of the appraisal education that is required to become licensed. And again, if folks can't even go through the education because it's cost prohibitive, they may never get to the PREA component that's named in this legislation currently. So we urge a favorable report on House Bill 609.
What's the cost?
The cost of PREA is about $8,000.
To get to do this education?
No, that PREA is the experience component. That's $8,000. Education consists of about a regimen of about 7 courses. So if I were to guess, I would say that the education is probably another $3,500 or so.
Where do you take the courses?
From course providers, like my organization, the Appraisal Institute.
They're not through like community colleges, they're like private.
So if we were to, oh, this is the, sorry, wrong bill. We would go back to the grant program. The Promise Grant is for community colleges, so that's where the coursework would come from. But if we are providing scholarships to those that are at any Maryland school that has the courses that are the required courses to pursue licensure to become an appraiser, the money could be used towards that.
And what's the cost for licensure after they get their 7 courses?
I think it's somewhere around a couple of $100. It's not significant.
And is it like a test or?
Yes, there is the National Uniform Licensing Exam.
You do your 7 courses, you've done that, and then you take a test?
No, you take the qualifying education, which is the program of 7 courses, then you satisfy the experience requirements either through the traditional supervisor trainee method or through this alternative online program that's referred to as PREA. And then once you've completed those 2, then you sit for the exam.
And Chair Barnes, we do have an appraiser here who could answer that question potentially. What's the cost?
And your bill would just, any of these costs would be eligible under the scholarship program?
That is correct. You might ask, why do we need to broaden? Why couldn't they use the scholarships now? Because our scholarships right now are only used for folks that are pursuing a degree program. In this case, they may only need to take a few courses and not necessarily be pursuing a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree.
Okay, got it. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for the bill.
Thank
See
you.
That concludes the bill hearing. I think we have to go back to House Bill 774. Delegate Davis, welcome.
Anyone else? He left. Chair Chang and Appropriations Committee, my name is Delegate Deborah Davis. I represent Charles County, District 28. I'm here to present HB 774. It's entitled Hunger Free Campus Grant Program. This is something you've seen before. You passed it in 2021, and I'm here to tell you it has been very successful. I want to first make the correction that we have amended this bill, HB 774, to mirror SB 789, which is Senator Washington's bill. We filed it initially together in 2021. The Hunger Free Campus Program, as I said, has been a success. As of this year, there have been 12 colleges in the state of Maryland who have participated in the program and have set up hunger-free campus programs, and they now qualify as a hunger-free campus. That was something we were looking for all colleges to do. We have given away all the money, and it sunsets on 2026. So this bill, what it does specifically is that it will start fiscal year 2027. It would increase the amount of funds from $100 by 100,000 to 250,000. And I think that's the only other difference. We're also going to remove private schools. We didn't make that private colleges. We didn't make that clear the first time. This is a great bill, as you know, because you've passed it before. We would appreciate your support, a favorable report, and thank you.
Hi.
Don't touch.
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Brielle Penzini, and I'm an anti-hunger program assistant with Maryland Hunger Solutions, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization authorized as one of the official state outreach partners to support Marylanders navigating SNAP. I'm here today to offer our support originally with amendment of HB 0774, and to thank Delegate Davis for working with us through those amendments to mirror the language to the Senate version of this bill. As the delegate stated, the new version would essentially increase the funding by $100,000 and also allow private institutions to receive the title of Hunger Free Campus grant, but not be eligible for the funding just currently because there's not enough for everyone. Outside of that, we'll highlight that the Hunger Free Campus, one of the greatest components of the current Hunger Free Campus grant program is the flexibility it allows campuses to build and strengthen food security program for students based on their unique needs of their community. Every student and every campus is different, and as the delegate stated, every year the total number of Hunger Free Campus grant requests surpasses the amount of available funding substantially. We look forward to working with the delegate through the amendments to again mirror that language to the Senate version, and we'll highlight that the recent GAO report identified and estimated that 1 in 4 students experience food insecurity while enrolled, and that SNAP participation among college students is distressingly low. The Hunger Free Campus grant program does a really good job at meeting the unique needs of each campus, dependent on the population specific to them. Outside of that, I'll just thank you and hope for a favorable report with amendment for HB 0774. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much to the bill sponsor and also Brielle. Any questions for the bill sponsor or the witness? Okay. Thank you very much. We have one more virtual. We have Andrea Calfoglo. Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just introduce me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name's Andrea Kalfoglu. While I'm an associate professor of public health at UMBC, my thoughts today are my own. I am also a member of the advisory board for Retriever Essentials, which is a student-led organization working to meet students' basic needs on campus. As House Bill 774 would increase the funds in the MHEC grant, I am requesting a favorable report with amendments. We know that approximately 30% of our college students are food insecure. You'll recall from last legislative session from the fiscal note on the SNAP for Students bill that the state actually estimated that 30,000 students would have qualified for SNAP if not for the work requirement. So we have a lot of students in dire need. The primary objective of this bill is to increase the amount of funding in the Hunger Free Campus grant program. These funds are desperately needed. So far, about a third of the 29 public colleges have been able to access these funds, but the grant applications outnumber the amount of money that is actually in the fund. So we need additional funds there. Please also consider removing the section requiring a minimum grant of $25,000. Coming up with the matching funds from colleges is no simple task. Students and volunteers largely run these programs on shoestring budgets. For example, UMBC, a large university, recently was awarded $19,000 from the grant, but that was because we could only come up with less than $5,000 in matching funds. Campuses like small community colleges should not be excluded from obtaining these grant funds because they can't meet that $25,000 threshold. The 15% take back for administering the grant fund seems unnecessary. Finally, the requirement that the commission report to the governor demographic data of students benefiting from the program implies that campus programs will have to collect and report these data as a condition of receiving the grant. Food insecurity is already heavily stigmatized. It's really difficult for us to get our students to come in and accept help. Those of us who are developing these programs are trying to avoid creating barriers to students' access to these programs. There are other ways to identify the demographics of food insecure students. I ask for your favorable report with those suggested amendments. Thank you.
Questions from members of the committee for our virtual witness? Bill sponsor, yes.
Yes. The amendments that she suggested have been amended out of the bill.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 774, and that concludes the bill hearing for today. Have a great day. Thanks.